Hey, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith. Well, welcome back to the podcast. This is season 2, episode 17, but we have huge news.
We need a drum roll.
I know, drum roll. This is actually our 100th episode that we have put out. Went back and did the math. It was funny because after we got done recording last week, I was like, oh man, I bet we're close to 100. Let me go and count. I was like, that may have been episode 100. And so I literally counted up, and last episode was 99, and this is 100. So congratulations, Pastor Rhonda.
Woohoo, to us.
We made it.
We did make it against all odds, huh?
That's right. And there may have been people out there who thought that we would not make it, and we did.
Here we are.
And so that's a huge milestone for us, and
Yes.
It's been awesome for me just to be able to have conversation. Even if a lot of people don't listen to it, that's okay. It's been beneficial for me on such a deep level.
Yeah. Do you remember our very first podcast? Do you remember where we were?
Yeah, so we were still pastoring. We were pastoring together,
Yes.
and we were in a little Sunday school classroom at Battlefield. So
That's where it started. And then after that, I remember going to your grandmother's house to record an episode. Do you remember that?
I do, and our equipment was not very good that episode, and I kind of tried to patch together some equipment with what we had, and I think we borrowed some equipment from Chattanooga Valley Church of the Nazarene. They were nice enough to let us borrow a couple of things that we could record before our equipment actually came in, and so that's absolutely unbelievable. I do remember kind of starting out. We did have some really good equipment. We struggled figuring out our microphones. And so if you go back and listen to some of the first couple of ones, we actually had these condenser microphones, and they would just pick up everything. I mean, if somebody made a noise on the other side of the church, that microphone was going to pick it up. And so, that made it a lot tougher in those early days in the recording process of trying to get everybody quiet in the building so that we could actually do our recordings and all of that.
Yeah, and I just keep thinking about some of the episodes we've had, and we've had a few guests along the way. We need desperately, we need to talk about that, but we need to start having guests back on the show. But I remember having Dr. Carla Sundberg, General Superintendent of the Church of the Nazarene, one of my favorite episodes. And we've had Dr. Hunter Cummings. And he's a good friend, but he's also a scholar. It's fun to pick his brain. And we had Reverend Jacoby Campbell, and he's doing great things in the Church of the Nazarene. And it's so cool because we had him on the podcast, and I had him in a class at Trevecca. And now to see him just thriving, it's great. So we've got to get back to doing that. But I think my favorite thing about the podcast is, you hear my dogs barking.
No worries.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think my favorite thing about the podcast is the pre-show that nobody ever gets to hear. So Seth and I are great friends, and I've been friends with his family for a while, and we always get on to record, and we start talking, and an hour will go by. And we just have the best time. Sometimes we're talking about the podcast material. Sometimes it's about like what his family's been up to. Sometimes it's about, what mine is. Sometimes it's just about ministry. But I love the fact that we are brother and sister in Christ. And I feel like we have linked arms, so to speak, and we have walked through this ministry journey together, through the good and the bad, the thick and thin, the ugly and the beautiful, and we're still here, and we're still making it, and we're still closer than ever. And I just publicly want to say thank you for being my brother. I mean, you helped me so much through, the course of study before I was ordained, and gave me opportunities to preach. And so, I mean, we go way back, but I'm just thankful to have a brother that really advocates for women in ministry, and I'm so thankful to be your sidekick on the show.
No, you're not my sidekick. You're not my sidekick. That's not how it goes.
We have so much fun, and I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the pre-show is we never record. There have been so many times, and I think we probably said on the podcast of like, we're going to talking about ministry or talking about the passage we're going to be talking about. And we're like, man, we should have been recording that. It would have been done. It would have been a lot longer of episodes. But the companionship has just been phenomenal. And like I said, just as much as I would say ditto to everything you said to me, it's been such a joy and a privilege to have that journey. And you've pushed me in my faith growth and my understanding, and so it's just been so cool to have an avenue, especially I came to Battlefield from a position of where I was preaching every Sunday, and when you get that opportunity to preach every Sunday, it's just different than sometimes I tried to put as much effort and energy as a youth pastor, into it. But it is a little bit different. It's kind of a different audience. And so to kind of have this outlet too, to dive into maybe some deeper things. But what I have loved about this, and it's sometimes I wonder, it's like, man, do we really sound like a broken record? But I feel like we have really pushed to the simplicity of the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ, and so it's been just an awesome reminder for me. I think for our first year, I don't think we missed a week. We may have missed 1 week. We didn't miss, and then after that year, it was kind of like, life happens, and so we've been we weren't consistent there for a little bit, but now we've kind of gotten back consistent, and but yeah, just having that weekly reminder that of the simplicity of the gospel and the goodness of the gospel, week in and week out, just has been really pivotal in my life on such a deep level. And I don't think I would have had that without these conversations that we had. Right. And so I thank you for that. It's helped me on such a deep level, and there's been nights where I've been struggling, and you've carried the podcast so well, and I know vice versa. There's been nights
where I've been falling asleep, or my contacts are dry, or I can't see.
And so it's been great, and I think it's been a great dynamic, and I'm thankful for it, and I don't anticipate on stopping, at 100.
And thanks to our spouses, too. They're so patient. I mean, Eric is like, oh, you going to record tonight? Okay, he does his thing. So they're so good. They're so good awesome. To us to just be quiet in the house and tiptoe around. And my husband's trying to make the dogs be quiet. And, he's sneaking around. And I'm sure Morgan's doing the same thing with the kids, trying to get them in bed and asleep. So thank you to our spouses that are really supportive in our ministry and what we do. 100%. And this is just another outlet. And I've learned so much from you about kingdom living and about what the kingdom is all about, and what the broad story of the gospel, and how to think in broader terms, that the gospel is not about just Jesus down on the cross for my little sins, or my big sins, my ugly sins, but it's a much bigger picture. It's about new creation. It's about, the kingdom that's already not yet. And it's so exciting to imagine what new creation is going to be when it's all said and done, when we get to that place. But I mean, we're there. We're just modeling what's coming. And I think you've been such a big help to help me broaden my thoughts about the gospel and about the kingdom, and how wonderful it is, and how good our King is. He is a King that is fair, and he's of love and grace and mercy, and that's what he is calling us to be. And I think that has been our theme. We've changed the name, and we've tried to stick to a theme, but I feel like over and over it is like a broken record. We are trying to learn, we're trying to get to the place ourselves, and we're trying to urge our listeners to really love like Jesus, and to love in a merciful way, in a graceful way. And that's not the way of the world. And I think that has been our song this whole 99 episodes up until now. But that's been our theme, is really pursuing the kingdom of God and modeling what the king's heart looks like. And I think we've really tried to do that, and we have room to grow in it, and we're still trying to figure it out.
Yep.
But that's been where we've been very passionate, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We started out, we were just trying to remember the first name of our first that we first had, and we think we got it. It was Real Faith, Real People was what we started out as. And that's just the heart of, like you said, of what it was trying to be is, we just want to be real, and we wanted to cut all of the excess crap out of, faith, and, it was time to get real and talk about the fact that, faith should be real.
Right.
And then we're called to be real people as we are interacting with the world. The world desires genuineness, and it's so easy for us, if we're not careful, to live an ingenuous life, and how we go about living the kingdom. And, I think that was the first push of that Real Faith, Real People. And it was fun then. And then, we did have the name changed, and we changed to Growing Hope, Living Faith. And I remember sitting in your house trying to decide, all right, what are we going to change? What are we going to change our name to? Our spouses were there. We were all just kind of throwing names out there, just, and, we were really just, once again, just trying to get to the core of, man, what do we really want this show to be about? Or what do we want people to really get out of this? And this is what we landed on, right? Like that's our hope, is that we're growing hope, and something that is so much bigger than us. And I mean, if we can keep on growing that hope within us, then we can go on and, live the faith. And, and it's a beautiful thing. And like I said, I won't say that every podcast that we've had has been overly joyous or whatever, because there's some of the realities of the kingdom are very, very tough and difficult, and they really require us to come head to head with our selfishness, with our, egos, with our pride, and that's really, really hard to do. But there is something hopeful about that, that it's so much beyond me. And when I realized that it is really beyond me, and it's not about me at all, it's about something else that we can hope for, then we go live the faith, and we live that out, on a daily basis. And but I remember vividly, sitting in your your house, in your living room, and having those conversations of, all right, well, what are we going to call ourselves now? What is this going to look like now? And I'm so thankful we have had some steady listeners throughout the time that we have recorded and kind of put these out. And I am thankful that we do have people who have listened in regularly, who have called it here, called it there. It doesn't get lost on us, and it's been good to get even just a little bit of feedback of people who have appreciated some of the conversations that we've had, and to hear the reality that, it's challenged them a little bit.
And we need to be more consistent with putting the episodes out there.
Yes.
And we keep saying we're going to do better about that. But yeah, just to go back to the name a little bit, I love the fact that it's a living faith, and we try to focus on not what was your faith like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Is it living and vibrant and abundant right now?
Yeah.
The relationship with God and your place in the kingdom. What are we doing in the kingdom of God? Are we growing this living faith? Living is not like I was alive, years ago, but it's right here, right now. It's living. And I love that. But it has been a joy, and we do appreciate our listeners and our families and our church that has supported what we do. And shout out to Pastor Mark and Dalton of First Church in the Nazarene. And I'm thankful for the support there. And we got to keep going.
Yeah. Where do we go from here? Do we just keep on with the lectionary? Like you said, do we try to get a lot more interviews with people, and try to reach out to some people to have some dialogues that really continue to push that growing hope, living faith? We've been doing this. How many years have we been doing this now? I guess we started in 23.
No. 22, I think.
22.
Was it the fall of 22, maybe?
Maybe in the fall of 22.
Because I think we left the church,
Advent.
our former church, yeah.
I think Advent was
in
the
23. You're watching us struggle.
Yeah, just trying to figure this out. Well, it's just reminiscing, like it's so good to reminisce and to think, but to think, we started this in 22. We're now, almost 3 years into this, which once again, I'm sure
we made it.
We made it. I'm sure there's people that once again they didn't think that we would make it to this place, but we're here and we're thankful. And no, it's been really a whole lot of fun. But yeah, maybe you guys have some ideas about some things that we can do that might sauce it up a little bit or change it up a little bit. I will say some of our most listened to episodes are our interviews that we've done. They have been the
what does that say about us?
Best performing. I don't know. Well, I think it says that we found good people to interview and they were really, really good. And so
and they share it too.
They shared it well. Yeah. So absolutely. So I think that I don't know. I haven't looked at our overall episode to see which one maybe is the most, but yeah, I think people did enjoy the interviews a lot, and so yeah, that might be a good way to do it.
He has suggested for us to reach out to the DS and have him on the podcast. He has a real heart for doing ministry differently. He has a heart for changing up how we do things. And I really enjoyed having him and just listening to, what he had to say at our assembly about bringing people to Jesus and how we've got to start thinking differently. We can't keep doing the same things over and over. If I learned one thing in school, it was study the Bible and study culture, because you've got to be able to connect the two. It does no good if you're a scholar and you have all of these ideas, but if you can't relay it to today's people and today's language, then you're not going to get anywhere. So I really think he may be a good person to reach out to and see if he'll talk. He had a story of how his church pretty much dwindled down to nothing during COVID. I mean, just very few people, and how they got creative and started really praying and leaning on the Holy Spirit, and how they really started reaching out to their community in non-conventional ways. And his story is pretty cool. So maybe this is a start, and maybe you have suggestions too. And we've got to get busy and try to get some more interviews, but
100%.
That's
which I think we can. I think we can, and I think we can definitely maybe. And like I said, you guys are just hearing us talking this out on air. Like we've been having some of these conversations, but like I said, we want to invite you
for over an hour.
We want to invite you into some of this conversation as well. But maybe we can do some ministry highlights, some ministries that maybe are in the Church of the Nazarene or outside of the Church of the Nazarene.
Yeah.
How they are a little bit different, and have some deeper conversations about some of the other things that we see. That are great examples of this growing hope living faith, and maybe can do some ministry highlights of some of those things out there. Like I said, I've got a couple on my brain, and that just kind of sitting here thinking about, and that might maybe inspire some people to think through, how can I live this faith differently in the context of my community? Because that's what it really boils down to. Is it's so easy. Like I said, to get overwhelmed at the world, to look around, and if you turn on the news today, it's very discouraging on such a deep level. It's very paralyzing, can be very paralyzing. And when you're watching that or consuming that, it's easy to lose hope and to ask the question, well, why? How can I make a difference? Why should I do anything? And it pushes us away from living that faith. And so, I think sometimes having examples and hearing examples of how people are ministering just in a different way, it really goes a long way. And I know it always encourages me and kind of uplifts me. And maybe that could be an avenue of trying to highlight, different ministries and maybe how people are living the gospel a little bit different, on a little bit different of a level. I think that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Well, this week is, last week was Pentecost Sunday.
Yes.
This week is Trinity Sunday, and I will not be preaching from the lectionary this week. I was invited to preach at Rome First Church in the Nazarene,
Yes.
and so it just seemed like the lectionary passages this week was a little heavy. I
Yes.
think to go into a church as a guest. I'm not an evangelist. I'm pulpit supply, and I definitely don't want to come in and just talk about suffering. You know, that's part of the Roman passage about. I feel like I don't know these people and love these people like a pastor that's walked through life with them to go in and start talking about afflictions and
Right.
and trying to encourage, you know what I'm saying. You're a pastor,
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean. And so I felt, and also it's Father's Day, and
Oh, yes.
I think I'm going to preach on David and Goliath this
Very
week.
nice.
So I'm kind of steering around, and my whole title would be like, who's the hero of this story? I think so often we think it's David, but God's the hero.
Yeah.
And how can we partner with him? And again, that goes right into our theme that we've talked about. How do we partner with him in the activity that God's doing? Because he's always at work, and that's what David did in that story. So I have detoured, and I feel like I've not studied these passages quite as much as I should. Of course, we've been talking. We've used our time to talk and talk about our 100th episode.
Yes.
But this is the first time we've ever been recording. We're going, which passage are we going to go with? But in our Wednesday night Bible study, we did focus on the Romans 5:1-5 passage, and then the John 16 one is a good one too, about how the Spirit will guide you into the truth. And I don't know, that one is a good one for me too. So I don't know where you want to start tonight.
I don't know either. Well, Trinity Sunday is always a hard Sunday, just to preach in general. Lots of times when you're preaching, you want to try to preach, and you want to be very firm in what you're preaching, have a lot of confidence in what you're preaching, and the truth and reality of the Trinity is it's just mysterious. There's no, we can't fully grasp and understand it. So many times we try to explain it. We try to use earthly terms to try to figure it out, and
always fall short.
All of them woefully fall short on such a deep level. And so, it's like, how do you talk about something that, once again, we just can't comprehend. But there is a lot of beauty in, the fact of Trinity, the example of Trinity. And I think it tells us a lot about God. There's a lot we can learn about God. And I think the more that we can learn about God, essentially it tells us the more about us, to some degree. And, we see relationship, obviously in Trinity, that there's this relational aspect. And then that obviously should tell us that, relationship is very important to God. And so how do we begin to push forward, when it comes to relationship? But we also see that truth, that the fact that we can celebrate the Spirit, and that the Spirit is with us. And I think that's why lots of times when you talk about Trinity, we push to the Spirit, because we live on that promise that He's here, He's been with us, He's been leading us, He's been guiding us. And like you said, just where that, that John passage comes in, that the Spirit guides us in truth. He leads us in truth. He leads us to the truth. And so it's a really beautiful place to talk about the Trinity, to talk about this mysteriousness. And like I said, I think that's what pastors need to talk about probably more than anything, is that there is just this mysteriousness, but we don't like to talk about that because we feel like we have to have all the answers. And and when we say, oh, maybe there's a little bit of mysteriousness, then we're worried that people are going to take that and run with it. But maybe it's not a bad thing that people take it and run with it.
Right. And the thing is, when you look at the Trinity, or you think about the Trinity, God, or the Father, is always revealing Himself. It's about revelation. So Jesus tells us what God is like. You look at the person of Jesus and how He lived, and we see the Father's heart in the life that He lived on earth. And then you have the Spirit that only says, they just all, it's like this dance, it's like they're all three intertwined, and we are invited to be part of that. And so for us to be a participant in a relationship, God is always, or the Father is always revealing himself through the Son and relaying that to us through the Spirit. And it's just beyond that, it's just so hard to even wrap our minds around three persons, one God. And it's just it's so hard. And that's why I think in this John 16 passage where Jesus says, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. And we still can't, but what's so interesting is that I'm not a math person, I'm not a numbers person, and if you were to sit me down in front of algebra or anything, when I was in school, I was freaking out that I was going to have to do that.
Yeah.
But you don't start there. You start with kids in elementary school, and they're counting, they're matching, apples, two literal apples with the number 2, and you start with these little baby steps. And so that's what Jesus is doing. He's revealing himself a little bit at a time, at a time. He says, I still have many things to say to you, but you can't bear them now. And then he gives them a little more revelation, a little bit more. But when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth, for he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. So it's that picture of this intertwine. You have the Father speaking to the Son, the Son speaking to the Spirit, relaying it to us, and but he's all revealing the Father. But he says in verse 14, he will glorify me, because he will take what is mine and declare it to you, and all that the Father has is mine. For this reason, I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. So that's just this picture of this revelation that's coming little at a time. And the only way that we could ever truly understand more about the Father's heart and understand more about God is just to be positioned in that, inside that Trinity, to be involved in that dance, to be in relationship. We have to position ourselves, and, he will reveal more of himself as we're spending time with him.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of talked about this a little bit in our Sunday school this last Sunday. We were talking about, we're working our way through the book of Revelation, and we were looking at the church of Thyatira or something like that. I don't know. You have to go back. But yeah, there was essentially a lot of things outside of the gospel or outside of Jesus that people were doing, and they essentially were kind of whoring out the gospel, turning the gospel into something that it was never, meant to be, using the gospel, but still aligned with kind of other gods, and so that happens a lot, I think, today on such a deep level. And we're just having that conversation in Sunday school of like, how do you know, right? Like, how do you know if something is of God or not of God? How do you know if it's true or if it's not true? Because it's so easy, once again, to be confused. There's so many people, so many pastors, so many churches that they're, if you're not careful, I mean, they're shiny hooks, it's like a fish going after a shiny bait. If you're not careful, you can get caught and get swallowed up in what they are, preaching or what they're declaring. I often struggle to think, man, how are TV evangelists on TV? Like, how do people just not realize that most of what they say, as far as prosperity gospel and saying, hey, if you give to me, then God's going to bless you. Like, how do most people just not realize the scam that is, on such a deep level? But if it wasn't, I mean, if they didn't have viewers, then they wouldn't be on TV. You know what I'm saying? And so people are watching, and people eat it up, and people
They do.
send in their money, and it's just like, how in the world, like this is so far from Jesus. And so, this last Sunday in Sunday school, I just kind of started talking about the reality of, when I was in college, in between my college years, during the summertime, I would come home, and I worked as a banker at a credit union. And, when I first, went in for training, you always think, all right, well, what happens if, I get a counterfeit bill? So it's very important as a banker that, if you did get a counterfeit bill, that you knew what it was. And so me going in, I thought, maybe the thing that we would do, and the most important thing that we could do, was to handle, counterfeit bills that they would show us, that they would, say, hey, you need to look for this, or hey, you need to, but what I found out, and obviously, after having conversations, they said, when it comes to counterfeit bills, it's not a matter of you knowing necessarily what to look for. But when you spend so much time with real money, and when you count so much real money, that you will finally get to a point that if a counterfeit bill comes across your desk, you will just know by the feel, like you will understand that is a counterfeit bill. And I think it's the same with Jesus, that the more we drive and push to Jesus, and the closer and closer we get to Jesus, and the more and more that we know Jesus, then it becomes so much more easier to actually spot and see the things that aren't Jesus. And so many times we focus on the things that aren't Jesus, whenever that's not what we should be focusing on all. The very thing we should be focusing on is Jesus, and getting closer and closer to Jesus. And as we do that, then I think a lot of things really simplify, and we'll begin to understand, what is of the Spirit, what's not of the Spirit, what, is a representation of the fruits of the Spirit, and what's not a representation of the fruit of the Spirit. And so we just had that conversation, and it goes right back to, essentially what you're talking about. Man, the closer and closer we can get to Jesus, then the better off that I think we'll be in understanding what really is of the Spirit out there. So good word. Yeah,
and we don't have to be afraid of the truth. The truth, if it's the truth, it doesn't matter what it is. Yeah. If it's the truth, then it's of God. It's like we don't discover the truth. It is a gift from God because He is truth. So we don't have to fear really anything like science or any kind of discoveries, because if it's indeed true, it is of Him, because He is truth, and He guides us into truth. We just have to be willing to go. We just have to be willing to cooperate with the process of being guided into truth, and to listen and to learn from His heart, from what He says. And it is about positioning, and I completely agree with your analogy with my husband working in banking for so long. I mean, and my mom was a banker, and she would say the same thing. You just feel it, you just know it, you just touch it, and it's like you instinctively, after feeling the real deal for so long, you will instinctively know when you're dealing with a counterfeit.
So good. Such a good word. Yes. So it's been an awesome experience today. And thanks for going back down memory road with us just a little bit. And hopefully, looking forward to what's going to be next. And like I said, we'll still be talking about lectionary. We'll still be talking about scripture and having these conversations. But I'm excited to see what may be over the horizon. And so I know that you're very busy. You have, a lot of schooling and different things going on. And my wife just started her master's. And so, we've got a lot going on as well. But I'm excited to see where this journey continues. Man, if you have questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to us. So we do have email and Facebook. Our email is growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com.
And we have a Facebook page. It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast. And we would love to hear from you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this 100th episode and being with us for these last 100 episodes. Know that we love you. We were praying for you. And we hope you have a great Trinity Sunday this Sunday. Grace and peace. God bless. Bye-bye.